Chapter 44:13. Huan went out first and saw the door of the suite. Chinamo came from behind. He didn't go around to the front of her. Instead, he reached out and opened the door through her body. It looked like he was holding her in his arms. Huan was a little embarrassed. They had been intimate countless times, but she still felt uncomfortable when they weren't even touching. After her miscarriage, she didn't seem to be able to be intimate with him. At this time, her avoidance naturally made Chinamo a little uncomfortable. Chinmo's eyes were dyed with a layer of black ink. He silently looked at her and went in first. Huan followed behind him. He closed the door and looked down at her for a while. Then, he took off his jacket and walked over to call for food. "I'm not hungry." Huan bit her lip. "I want to talk to you about Huan, and I'm hungry." Chinamo stared at her and said coldly. With that said, he walked to the wine cabinet and took out a bottle of red wine. Then, he took out 2 glasses and poured one for himself and one for her. He didn't hand it to her, but held the glass and drank it slowly. Huan stood there and pursed her lips. She didn't say anything. They used to be husband and wife, but now they were frighteningly distant. In the end, it was Chinamo who spoke first. "Take off your jacket and sit down and drink a glass of water. You're as pale as a ghost. Even if you want to do something to me, I don't think I have the appetite." Huan wanted to refute, but she held back. She did as he said. He put down the glass in his hand and poured her a glass of water. When he handed it to her, his fingers touched her palm. It was cold. Chinamo looked at her silently for a while. Then, he walked back to the bar and drank his red wine. It seemed that he wasn't satisfied. He lit a cigarette and took a puff. His cold expression finally seemed to soften a little. Perhaps he felt a little better. But after he took a few puffs, Huan coughed. Chinamo sat behind the bar and looked up at her. "Did you catch a cold?" Just these 3 words were enough to make people feel a little overwhelmed by the favor. Huan shook his head. Chinamo was still staring at her, but he put out his cigarette. Just then, there was a knock on the door. He got up to open it and pushed the dining cart in. The meal he ordered was very sumptuous. How was a midnight snack? It was clearly dinner. Chinamo set the table and looked at Huan. "Come and eat." She still wanted to say that she didn't want to eat, but Chinmo's expression was very ugly, so she could only sit down. The 2 of them didn't speak, they just ate together in silence. Chinamo obviously didn't eat at the banquet. In fact, he didn't have a good appetite these days, so he ate quite a lot. Huan was hungry and ate as much as a kitten. "Do you not like to eat? But do you not like to eat with me?" He looked at her quietly, as if he was in a difficult position. Huan looked up at him, then lowered her head and continued eating. While thinking about some things, he ate a little fiercely and quickly. By the time her stomach was completely uncomfortable, her face was as white as a sheet. She covered her mouth and rushed to the bathroom. She vomited everything she had eaten, even her bile. Chinamo walked over quickly. His hand hesitated for a moment, but he still put it on her shoulder. He also felt her body stiffen for a moment. He whispered, "What's wrong?" Huan was still a little stiff. She bit her lip and whispered, "Maybe I caught a cold and ate too much. My stomach feels a little uncomfortable." Chapter 44:14. As she spoke, she took out a tissue to clean herself up and turned around to rest. Chinamo had already picked her up and said in a hoarse voice, "Let me carry you." Before Huan could react, he had already carried her to the master bedroom. Huan was very weak. She bit her lip and hugged his neck in the end. Chinamo put her on the soft bed and poured her a glass of warm water before calling the doctor. Huan heard his call and struggled to sit up. "I'm fine. There's no need to call the doctor." Chinamo looked at her coldly, then hung up the phone after he finished speaking. He looked at her and picked up the glass of water from the bedside table. "Why don't you drink?" Huan looked down. "I don't want to." Chinamo held her shoulders with one hand and put the glass to her lips with the other. His voice was short and strong. "Drink." Huan looked at him in a daze. Chinamo, but the water had already reached her. She was forced to drink half a glass and shook her head to show that she didn't want to drink anymore. Chinamo put down the glass and helped her lie down. Huan didn't feel well and lay down quietly. She was probably tired. It was already past midnight. She actually fell asleep. Chinamo didn't continue eating. He looked at Huan for a while and then walked to the French window. He looked at the night sky outside and looked down at his phone from time to time. He was still wearing the clothes he wore at the dinner party. He was so cold that any woman would be tempted by him, but not his ex-wife, Hee-hwan. He wondered how cold-hearted she must be to turn a blind eye to him. She only remembered Hee-hwan, her parents, and Romeo. When had she ever cared about him? Chin-mo closed his eyes as he thought about it. When Hee-hwan woke up, she was weak all over. She heard Chin-mo's deep and pleasant voice. He was probably afraid to wake her up, so he kept his voice low. He was asking the doctor about the precautions, and the doctor was explaining patiently. Hee-hwan woke up, but she couldn't face him, so she closed her eyes and pretended to be asleep. Chin-mo was talking to the doctor when he inadvertently lowered his head to look at Hee-hwan's face. He pursed his lips slightly and did not expose her. He only said a few more words to the doctor and sent him away. When he turned around again, he sat on the edge of the bed. "Since you're awake, get up and eat something. You vomited out everything you ate earlier. Eat something light before taking the medicine." It was pointless for Hee-hwan to continue pretending. He slowly opened his eyes. "What's wrong with me?" Chin-mo looked at her and reached for a bowl of red date porridge. He said in a low voice, "Sit up, I'll feed you." She was embarrassed. She propped herself up and felt a little dizzy. "I'll eat by myself." Chin-mo looked at her and didn't say anything. Hee-hwan was even more embarrassed and could only let him feed her. She didn't have a good appetite, but this bowl of porridge was surprisingly soft and delicious. 10 minutes later, she finished the whole bowl. Chin-mo put the bowl back and opened the medicine box. He said in a low voice, "The doctor said that you don't pay attention to your meals. You're slightly anemic and malnourished." Hee-hwan was a little dazed as she listened. When she came back to her senses, the medicine was already in front of her. She was stunned for a moment and instinctively resisted. She was afraid of suffering since she was young. "Do you want me to feed you by myself?" Chin-mo's voice was hoarse. Hee-hwan understood what he meant by feed her by himself. Of course, she wouldn't let him feed her. She took the medicine hurriedly and popped it into her mouth. It was so bitter that her little face scrunched up. Chapter 44:15. Chin-mo looked at her. Her little face was bitter, and she looked up at him with a pitiful expression. Chin-mo's voice was hoarse. "Swallow it." She shook her head, still refusing the bitter medicine. But at this moment, Chin-mo pressed his hands on her shoulders and moved closer to her. Hee-hwan's eyes widened. She knew what he was going to do, so she immediately covered her mouth and swallowed the medicine. She was a little timid the whole time. Chin-mo looked at her and slowly let go of his hand. After he took his hand back, Hee-hwan coughed. When she saw him again, she wanted to say something, but Chin-mo stopped her. "Go to sleep. We'll talk tomorrow." She still wanted to say something, but Chin-mo had already pressed her shoulders again, half forcing her to lie down. Hee-hwan moved and said indifferently, "If you want to talk, then we have nothing to talk about." So Hee-hwan understood that she could either go to sleep now or get out. He had expressed it vividly. She had no choice but to close her eyes and sleep. Actually, she was still a little scared. She was afraid that Chin-mo would sleep with her. But she closed her eyes for a long time, and there was no movement. She opened her eyes and was stunned. Chin-mo stood at the head of the car and locked his eyes on her. He didn't say anything and just looked at her. For some reason, Hee-hwan immediately closed her eyes. She didn't dare to look at him anymore. They had been husband and wife for many years, but his gaze at this moment still made her feel a little scared. Then she closed her eyes. Chin-mo's voice was low and hoarse. "We'll talk tomorrow." As he said that, he bent over and covered her with a quilt. He looked at her deeply before he wanted to leave. His arm was caught by Hee-hwan. He turned around. Hee-hwan held him with one hand and opened her eyes. She looked at him with a pleading expression. "Chin-mo, I beg you." He looked at her quietly and said after a long time, "Go to sleep first. We'll talk tomorrow." Still, he gently pried her hand away and walked out of her sight. Hee-hwan was in a daze. After a long time, she bit her lips, and there was a hint of pain in her eyes. In fact, she knew in her heart that Chin-mo probably wouldn't give in so easily. She didn't know what he was thinking. She was very sleepy, tired, and uncomfortable. She closed her eyes and eventually fell asleep. Chin-mo walked out and looked at the table quietly. Of course, he was not in the mood to continue eating. He walked to the French window and stood there for a while, then lowered his head and lit a cigarette. He slowly smoked and stood there until late at night. His posture was cold and aloof. Actually, it was lonely at the top. Who could understand his loneliness? When the ashes between his fingers burned out, he tried again, but couldn't find anything. Only then did he let out a long sigh. Qin Mo turned and walked into the bedroom. Di Huan was still asleep. He looked at her quietly for a long time before taking his bathrobe to the bathroom. When he came out, he felt refreshed and quietly looked at Di Huan. In the end, he was probably angry that he didn't sleep with her and slept somewhere else. When Di Huan woke up early in the morning, Qin Mo had already gotten up and was tying his tie. Seeing that she sat up, he quickly tied his tie and walked over to touch her face. "You had a low fever last night." Later, he stayed by her side for the whole night. Di Huan looked at Qin Mo. Her throat was a little sore and a little hoarse. "Where are you going?" "Have a meeting." He looked at her quietly. "Get up and have breakfast with me. We'll talk about it when I come back." Chapter 44:16. Di Huan's lips were pale and pink. She stared straight at him and wanted to reject him, but Qin Mo said forcefully, "I'll leave in half an hour. Do as you see fit." Di Huan bit her lower lip. "When are you coming back?" Qin Mo was still staring at her. After a while, he said indifferently, "About the same as last night. You'll stay here." "What do you need?" Di Huan interrupted him. "I'm here to talk to you about something. If you can't wait, you could go back to B City," he said coldly. Di Huan's temper flared up. She immediately got up, but then she regretted provoking him. In the end, she took her clothes and went to the bathroom. She came back 2 minutes later. Qin Mo sat at the dining table with a cold expression. Di Huan quietly sat opposite him and began to eat breakfast. He had a Western style, and Di Huan only had a bowl of red dates and longan porridge in front of her. It looked very nourishing. Qin Mo put the spoon in the bowl and looked at her. "Finish the porridge and eat the medicine." She nodded. Qin Mo was still staring at her. "I'll watch you finish it." Actually, Di Huan couldn't take it anymore. "I'll eat it." "I don't believe you." Qin Mo's expression was cold. "I want to watch you finish it." Di Huan could only eat the porridge silently and then eat the medicine as if she was angry. Because it was too bitter, her little face was wrinkled. She looked a little pitiful and cute. Qin Mo's face had been tense for a long time. Looking at her, he finally relaxed a little. He pushed a glass of water in front of her and said in a slightly low voice, "Drink some water." Di Huan looked at him for a long time and then hummed in a low voice. Qin Mo watched her drink the water. After drinking the water, Di Huan looked at him and asked, "Do you have time to talk when you come back tonight?" At this moment, she was humble because she had been tormented by him for a long time. Qin Mo said indifferently, "We'll talk when I come back." It took him a long time to come back, and he only came back late at night. Di Huan was already asleep when she sensed Qin Mo returning from outside. She heard the sound of his clothes and the sound of him taking a shower. Then he returned to the master bedroom and stood by the bed for a while. Di Huan was a little nervous, afraid that he would lie next to her. But in the end, he still went out and probably slept in the guest room. After he left, Di Huan finally heaved a sigh of relief. Her nerves all over her body relaxed, and she slowly fell asleep. When she woke up, she was already on the plane. Di Huan got up from the bed and looked around in confusion. Just then, one of Qin Mo's secretaries came over and said in a sweet voice, "Director He, you're awake. President Qin is in a meeting." Di Huan knew that they were on a private plane. She sighed. "Where are we going?" "Europe." The second secretary smiled. "France, England, Germany. About 7 or 8 countries. President Qin's schedule is very full." 7 or 8 countries, Di Huan frowned. Is this official business or a vacation? The second secretary's smile was a little subtle. You'll have to ask President Qin about this. We're just his followers." How could Di Huan not understand? She didn't say anything more. She just sat on the bed and pulled the corner of the bed to look at the clouds outside. Seeing that she didn't want to talk, the second secretary didn't dare to disturb her and left quietly. After a while, Qin Mo walked in. "You're awake?" Di Huan looked up. Did you add sleeping pills to the milk last night? Qin and Mo didn't deny it. I added half a pill. Chapter 44:17. After she asked, Qin and Mo looked at her silently. Added half a pill. Iwan was furious. Qin and Mo, you're shameless. He stared at her. You need to rest. His tone was indifferent, but Iwan was well aware of the domineering and forceful tone in his voice. She didn't say much to him. She sat up and looked outside for a long time. Then she turned to look at Qin and Mo. Where are we going now? Can Iwan be sent to my mother's place? She paused, lowered her voice, and said bitterly, After all, I'm here with you, aren't I? Qin Mo's eyes fell on her face. He didn't avoid the question, but he didn't agree either. He said calmly, The Yi family has the best education environment. There's nothing wrong with sending Iwan there. Iwan stared at him. Qin and Mo, are you kidding me? Iwan is my child. Do you want Iwan to marry Yi Xiangnan like Tang Sher? Her voice became more and more severe. You're using Iwan's happiness in exchange, aren't you? I know the Yi family is powerful, but Iwan is my child. I won't allow it. Her guardianship is in my hands, isn't it? Qin and Mo reached out to hold her sharp chin, gently touched her, and chuckled. Iwan's face was pale. Of course, she knew that Iwan's custody was in his hands, so she had always been polite to him. However, she didn't expect him to use such a method. Qin and Mo, do you still have any feelings? She squeezed out an embarrassed smile. What are you going to do? Keep Iwan there? Qin and Mo stared at her. After a moment, he chuckled. His deep voice reverberated through the Hun's chest, sounding very manly. Iwan, do you really not know what I want? Iwan glared at him. Of course she knew, but she was not willing to give it to him. She knew in her heart that if she returned to Qin Mo's side once again, he would break her wings and never let her fly again. As for Iwan, career, life, freedom, and Iwan were all things that she could not give up. Iwan didn't answer him. Instead, she looked out the window. The private plane flew into the distance. She had followed him from country to country, passed through many places, and accompanied him to several film festivals and cocktail parties. Almost every day, Iwan would put on an evening gown and accompany Qin and Mo to various places to socialize. After being married for so many years and then divorced, she finally realized how tiring and unhappy it was to be a qualified Mrs. Qin. For the past few days, she had been sleeping with him, and he had not touched her. But every night, she was tense. She was afraid that he would suddenly become interested. Just like that, 10 days passed. Not only did Iwan not recover, but she also became weaker. Qin and Mo was dealing with business in the hotel suite. After the secretary finished reporting, she said, President Qin, have you noticed that director? He doesn't look too good. Should we let her rest? Qin and Mo looked at her and closed the document. Why would she say that? The secretary told the truth. Secretary, he said that Director He's health isn't good. So she asked me to remind President Qin that President Qin is a man after all, and women are more meticulous. Qin and Mo frowned. Are you saying that I'm not meticulous? Chapter 44:18. Hearing his rhetorical question, the second secretary didn't know what to do and didn't dare to say anything. After all, President Qin was the boss and not the approachable kind. The atmosphere was a little gloomy, but she didn't expect Qin and Mo to nod. Make arrangements for a private flight back in the afternoon. The second secretary's mouth fell open and her eyes widened at an abnormal angle. Qin and Mo just stared at her. Are you stupid? Why aren't you going out? The second secretary turned around and left immediately. She had just closed the door when Iwan came over. Looking for President Qin? The second secretary smiled. President Qin said he'll be returning in the afternoon. I'll contact the airport. The second secretary felt a little uncomfortable in front of Iwan, because Iwan was actually not young. She was in her early 30s, but she was small, thin, and fair. She looked like she was about 22 years old, which made her, a 28-year-old rookie in the workplace, look even older. The second secretary grabbed her hair and smiled a little foolishly. Just as she was about to leave, Iwan stopped her. Thank you. Huh? The second secretary was stunned. Iwan said quietly, In the morning, your President Qin said his next stop was Egypt. And now he changed his mind, probably because the second secretary had said something. The second secretary was also a smart person. Because King Entertainment was huge, it was already impressive that she could climb to become the second secretary of Chairman Qin. She didn't need to think to know what Huan meant. So she scratched her head again. It's secretary, he's instructions. Huan just smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. She walked into Qin Mo's study. The second secretary stood there for a while and shook her head. Sigh, she didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing to be loved by President Qin like this. Anyway, she wasn't happy when she saw Director He. Which woman wouldn't be tired after being dragged around all over the world after giving birth? And she heard that President Qin did something Director He wasn't happy about. This couple looked harmonious, but the whole world knew there was a problem between them. Their expressions couldn't lie. Huan opened the study door and used her body to block it. She stood quietly by the door and looked at Qin. Qin Mo was originally dealing with work and had his head lowered. However, he did not need to look up to know that it was her. He asked softly, "What's the matter?" Huan was still standing there and said softly, "You're going back to China in the afternoon, right?" "Yes." Qin Mo's eyes fell on the file. After a while, he closed it and looked up at Huan. "Sit on the sofa. Secretary Liu said you didn't look well. I don't think I mistreated you." Actually, she couldn't sleep well at night because she was afraid of him. But the more she was afraid of him, the angrier she got. After a few times of this, Huan's health deteriorated. He wasn't unworried. The second secretary's words were just a way for him to get out of this embarrassing situation. After Qin Mo finished speaking, Huan slowly walked over and sat down. Then, Qin Mo got up, walked over, and sat opposite her. Huan felt a little uneasy. She had never thought that one day she would feel uneasy when she was with him. She pursed her lips and hesitated for a moment. "Qin Mo, can you let me and Huan go?" "Let you go?" Qin Mo smiled. "I didn't say I wouldn't let you go. In fact, you can leave now. But you can't take Huan away." Huan was furious. "Do you have a heart? Huan is your child." Qin Mo chuckled softly. "What's wrong with the Yi family?" "Huan, you're overthinking. I'm just giving Huan a good future." Chapter 44:19. Qin Mo chuckled. "What's wrong with the Yi family?" "Huan, aren't you overthinking things? I'm just giving Huan a bright future. You were the one who said that I would marry another woman in the future and have other children. So, Huan is redundant just like the one you know. And I don't want to let you take advantage of me. So," before he could finish, Jun Yin was slapped in the face. Huan had slapped him. She was furious. Biting her lip, she glared at him. "Qin Mo, you're inhumane." After she slapped him, her palm was burning. A red mark soon appeared on his face, which looked a little frightening. Qin Mo's gaze was a little scary, but he didn't get angry at her. He only said in a low voice, "Is that so? If I'm not human, then who is? Who is the beautiful existence in your heart?" He was the devil. She couldn't wait to leave. Huan couldn't care less. She couldn't care less about anything. She just wanted to leave him. A sinister look flashed past Qin Mo's eyes. He had been holding it in for a long time, and he didn't want to hold it in any longer. But when he stretched out his hand and saw the fear in her eyes, he suddenly realized what he had done. He had almost done the same thing again. Huan's small body was curled up on the sofa. Her palm-sized face looked weak and weak. It was obvious that she had been bullied by him. Qin Mo's heart ached, and he frowned. "I won't do anything to you." He knew that he had gone against his will. He clearly wanted to do something to her, and it was the kind of thing where he could do whatever he wanted. He was a mature man, and there was no difference between having a wife and not having a wife. She wouldn't let him touch her and would show that kind of expression every time he touched her. What else could he do? Qin Mo also felt a little bored. He got up and walked into the washroom. "Take a break. We'll leave after lunch." He paused and turned his head. "You can think about your choice before flying to Bee City." Huan was still sitting on the sofa, not moving. She knew what he meant too well. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were filled with exhaustion. After a long time, like a cat whose paw had been stepped on, she quickly jumped up and ran out. Even sharing the same space with him made her feel like a kind of restraint. When Chinamo walked out, he saw that she was not there. His eyes were filled with some disappointment, but he did not say anything. He just quietly walked to the desk, wanting to continue working, but for a long time, he did not read a word. In the end, the documents on the table were swept to the ground by him. His heart felt even more vexed. He walked to the French window and lit a cigarette. In fact, he knew in his heart that letting go of their marriage was the best choice. She hated him and rejected him. She didn't love him anymore. However, Dihuan didn't know that he couldn't bear the thought of her not loving him. Chinamo stayed in the study until lunchtime. When he entered the dining room, Dihuan was already sitting there. When she was alone, she would wear cotton home clothes. The loose clothes made her face look even smaller. Her long hair had grown to a certain length, and it was black and straight. He walked over and sat at the main seat, looking at her silently for a while. Dihuan was a little lost in her thoughts. She used her fork to poke at the food. It didn't seem like she was eating, but more like she was venting something. Chinamo silently passed a piece of streaky pork to her, and Dihuan poked at it. Chapter 44:20. Chinamo silently handed a piece of streaky pork to her, and Dihuan directly poked it in her mouth. Instantly, the gravy of the streaky pork splashed everywhere, dirtying her little face. She was a little stunned and came back to her senses. Chinamo looked at her. "You don't eat this?" Dihuan was very picky about food and didn't eat fat ones, but Chinamo would occasionally eat a few pieces. He used to tease her like this when she was distracted. Dihuan came back to her senses and stared at the streaky pork in front of her. After a long time, she whispered, "I don't like it." "You don't like it, so you're never willing to force it, right?" His words had a double meaning. "Dihuan, in fact, there are some things I don't like very much, but I'm willing to accommodate you." She didn't want to talk to him at all. As he said that, she put the streaky pork in her mouth. Chinmo's eyes narrowed. Because she never ate it. No matter how many benefits and threats there were in the past, she didn't eat it. But now, she actually ate it. When Dihuan ate, her expression could be called numb. Chinmo clenched his fingers and put down his cutlery. He didn't know what kind of mood he was in. "Stop eating." But Dihuan was still trying hard to eat. She didn't look like she was enjoying the food, but she was enduring it. What she was enduring wasn't the food, but him. Chinamo reached out and pinched her chin, saying word by word, "I told you to stop eating." Dihuan didn't move and looked at him quietly. At this time, she had eaten the streaky pork, which she hated the most since she was a child. It tasted worse than she had imagined, but it didn't seem very difficult. After a long time, she said bitterly, "Didn't President Qin tell me to eat it?" President Qin is so powerful that I seem to have to do whatever he wants me to do. Chinamo felt that his breathing was painful. He let go of her chin and stroked her lips. His voice was very soft and gentle, but it was creepy. "Do you think I forced you?" "Dihuan, do you really think I can force you? Have I ever forced you to do anything you don't like? You're like a zombie in there. You don't even give me a smile. You look at me as if I'm your enemy." "Dihuan, are you the only one in the world who feels pain?" "I feel pain too. Or do you think I don't feel pain? I'm bored, and I'm just playing with you. No one asked you to do this." In contrast to his anger, Dihuan was very calm. "You can take back your passion and use it on other women. I think both Ai Jia and Su Ilio would be very willing to experience your passion." Chinamo was still angry. He stared in her eyes and said word by word, "Dihuan, you have no heart. It was eaten by a dog. She didn't give in at all. Chinamo, I'm a person, not a thing. I won't stay with you just because you like me. You can threaten me, but you really can't force me. If you want an answer, I can tell you now. My parents can be rich or ordinary. As for Dihuan, I'll find the best lawyer to fight with you." Chinamo narrowed his eyes. "Did the streaky pork give you the courage?" Dihuan tightened her chin. "Whatever you say, Chinamo, we're finished. I won't stay with you because of your threat. It's been so many days, and I can't convince myself." Chapter 44:21. Dihuan's fingers clenched into fists. Then, she got up from the dining room and walked toward the master bedroom. Chinamo was also very fast. He quickly grabbed her hand. Where are you going? Huan flung his hand away and said in a hoarse voice, I'm going back. I'm not going to take President Qin's private plane. Qin Mo's expression was very ugly. Huan, do you know what you were talking about? Huan looked at Qin and Mo quietly and said with a hint of helplessness and despair in her voice, Qin and Mo, you know. She looked at him as she said that. For some reason, she suddenly said, I still hate streaky pork. Then why do you still want to eat it? Qin Mo's tall body moved forward silently, giving off a sense of threat. Huan didn't move. She just stared at him. Because I have no choice. This time, she really left. Huan didn't have much luggage. She only had a small bag, which was mainly her passport. When she left, she didn't even look back. There was no trace of nostalgia. Qin Mo stood where he was, his slender body very tense. A moment later, he suppressed himself and called his second secretary. I won't return to B City for the time being. Qin Mo didn't go back, so Huan couldn't find him even though she wanted to. By the time Huan returned to B City, it was already 20 hours later. She was very tired, but she still insisted on looking for Wen Yuan first. She wanted to ask her about Huan's whereabouts. The two women met at a cafe, and Wen Yuan was shocked when he saw Huan. It had only been 2 or 3 months since he last saw Huan. At that time, Huan looked healthy and energetic. Although she was still young now, she looked like a fragile doll. Wen Yuan didn't know about men's aesthetics, but she thought that most men would feel sorry for her, right? As soon as he spoke, his voice was a little hoarse. How did you lose so much weight? Huan lowered her eyes. I don't know, but I had a miscarriage. I've been in poor health ever since. Wen Yuan was stunned. After a while, he said, I heard that you stayed abroad with President Qin for a long time a while ago. There was news about her every day in the entertainment newspapers, but Huan looked much better after putting on makeup. She didn't look as haggard as before. After Wen Yuan asked, Huan lowered her eyes. I want him to return Huan to me. As she spoke, she looked at Wen Yuan. Wen Yuan, I would like to ask you for a favor. Actually, Wen Yuan was already prepared, but at this moment, he was also a little flustered. She pretended to be calm and took a sip of coffee. Then, she thought for a while and said in a low voice, Huan, it's not that I don't want to help you, but Yi Mulin sent Xiangnan, and Huan to boarding school together. Moreover, it's the Yi family's arrangement, so I can't make the decision on this matter. She asked Yi Mubai, but Yi Mubai refused to say. Huan couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. However, she was well aware of the outcome. It was impossible for Qin Mo to let her take Huan away easily. He must have made a strict arrangement. Huan was stunned for a while, but she still stood up. Wen Yuan, I still have to thank you. She really couldn't blame anyone for this matter. She had to thank him for taking care of Huan. Wen Yuan also felt a little guilty. He pursed his lips and said, Huan, I'd better try my best to talk to Mubai. Maybe he can help you. At least, you can meet him on the weekend. The kids had to go home on the weekend. Wen Yuan could still make the decision to meet them, but it was probably impossible for him to leave the Yi family. Chapter 44:22. She had made it clear, and Huan understood. She thanked her softly and left. She had a lot of things to do, even though she was very tired now. Wen Yuan sat there alone and finished his coffee. Then, he called Yi Mubai and said, I'm done. Come and pick me up. Yi Mubai came to pick her up immediately and arrived in less than 10 minutes. Wen Yuan got into the car and said while fastening his seatbelt, It's Huan. Yi Mubai glanced at his wife and sighed. What are you trying to say? Wen Yuan's voice continued to be indifferent. Mubai, Huan doesn't look well. You can't see the child, and Qin and Mo messed up the house. You men don't know how hard it is for a woman. Yi Mubai turned to look at his wife and smiled silently. How can I not know how hard it is for you? Don't I try hard to repay you every night? He was getting more and more indecent. Wen Yuan bit his lip and looked out the window. If you want to repay me, return Huan to Huan. She looked at him anxiously. Wen Yuan was a mother, and she had given birth to Yi Hui. After having a little girl, her mood was very soft. Yi Mubai touched his wife at the red light and sighed. I really can't make the decision on this matter. Qin Mo is looking for Yi Mulin. Think about my big brother. Why don't you go and persuade him? Yi Mubai sighed. Wen Yuan looked at him with a strange expression and snorted. You sound jealous. It's good that you know. His voice suddenly became gentle. So, don't worry about it. How could Wen Yuan say anything else? He merely sighed softly and did not say anything else. After He Huan left the cafe, she went to the hospital to visit Rongyu. When she returned to Su Cheng's place, she had fainted instead of recovering. When she woke up, she was in the hospital. It was Shenyuan Hospital. She opened her eyes and saw Qin Chen's smiling eyes. Long time no see, He Huan. You look much prettier. In the past, He Huan had been running around all day. Although she was beautiful, she was still far from her current sickly and weak self. She was really beautiful now. Not only was she beautiful, but she also had an extremely weak beauty. Even Qin Shun couldn't stand looking at her, let alone a man. Moreover, Qin Shun was sure that his brother wouldn't be able to control himself. If he managed to hold it in, then he probably couldn't hold it in anymore. Just thinking about it made Qin Shun feel a little happy. On the other hand, He Huan was still very weak. She leaned against the headboard of the bed and looked very weak. Qin Shun gave her a nutrient injection and sighed. After you had a miscarriage the last time, my mother knew about it too. After that, Qin Mo sent He Huan to the Yi family and quarreled with my parents very fiercely. He Huan, you must have never seen my brother so crazy. It was as if he had lost his mind. It was as if he did not want anything. Even He Huan could be sacrificed. You should know what this means, right? He Huan leaned against the bed. Her voice was a little weak, but she didn't relax at all. She said lightly, I don't care how crazy he is. I won't go back to him. Chapter 44-23. He Huan looked down and didn't say anything. Hence, Qin Shin knew that it was impossible. He Huan hated Qin Mo in his heart. Actually, if she were He Huan, she would hate him too. On the day of her miscarriage, Qin Mo wanted to create a scandal. Moreover, Qin Shin knew that Qin Mo didn't have any feelings for Su Yi Huan, but it didn't mean that he didn't have any thoughts about her. At the very least, she would be his future wife. If Yi Huan didn't have a chance, if Yi Huan didn't get pregnant and miscarry, Qin Mo and Yi Huan would probably be the same. However, there were always accidents. This accident was Yi Huan's pregnancy and miscarriage. At this moment, Qin Shun felt that Qin Mo was more flustered and distressed. However, Yi Huan might not be able to understand his feelings. Qin Mo probably didn't want to express it. Even if her sister expressed it, Yi Huan wouldn't be able to bear it. She sighed and said, Yi Huan, maybe your personalities are too similar. That's why you often hurt each other. But believe me, in this world, no one will love you more than Qin Mo. He's just afraid of losing you. Qin Shin paused and lowered his voice. Or maybe you didn't give him a sense of security. Huan, men need a sense of security sometimes. Yi Huan raised her head. It's impossible for me and him. Qin Shin sighed. He could only say that Yi Huan was too young. Which are the things that Qin Mo wanted to do that he didn't accomplish? Her voice became gentle. Rest now. Your body can't be tortured anymore. Stay in the hospital for at least a week. Yi Huan still wanted to say something, but Qin Shin pressed on her. Listen to me. As she said that, she took the blood report from the side. Your body is very weak, and your blood is very precious. Yi Huan, you know what I mean. Yi Huan leaned against the headboard. Her body was a little weak. At this moment, she felt that there was nothing she could do. She could only wait. After Qin Shin made arrangements for Yi Huan, she immediately went back to her office after Yi Huan fell asleep. After thinking for a while, she called Qin Mo. Where are you? Abroad. Qin Mo was a man of few words. Qin Shin wasn't very polite to him. Then do you know that Yi Huan is sick? Qin Mo's voice suddenly lowered a few degrees. What happened to her? I thought you didn't care about her and only wanted to suppress the He family and Rongyu, or give Yi Huan away. Qin Shin said sarcastically. In fact, she also thought that Qin Mo had gone too far. Since he liked her, he should have pursued her properly and loved her properly. Why did things have to turn out like this? Qin Mo's voice became a little hoarse. Get to the point. What happened to her? It's not a serious illness, but Qin Mo, You let a woman who just had a miscarriage follow you all over the world. Her heart is still broken, and her body is also injured. You also did so many things to her. Qin said something fair. Qin still didn't seem to be moved. After a while, he said in a low voice, "It's good that she's fine." Qin was a little stunned. After a while, he asked in a low voice, "Aren't you coming back to see her?" "She will come to me," Qin said ruthlessly. Qin had to restrain himself from cursing out loud. After a while, he said in a low voice, "You'll regret it. Even if the He family falls, even if Rongyu has no future, even if you don't let Ihuan meet you, you know what kind of person Ihuan is. Brother, don't wait until the woman's heart turns cold." Chapter 44-24. Qin didn't know what Qin was thinking. He only knew that Qin had no intention of coming back. Qin was a little embarrassed. Was leaving a woman in the hospital really the right way to chase a woman? However, Qin couldn't ask. This was probably what Qin was sure about, so he was relieved. Being relieved didn't mean being at ease. President Qin, who was far away in a country, put down his phone and stood on the balcony of a banquet hall, looking at the night view outside. At this moment, the bustling night was alarmed. It wasn't gentle, but a little sharp, just like his mood at the moment. Su Ilya walked to his side and handed him a glass of red wine. She said softly, "Is it about director, he?" Qin just glanced at her, but he took the glass and drank slowly. He didn't say anything. He was even quieter than the night. Su Ilya was a little bitter. Qin looked very lonely. She was here, and they were friends, and her family was better than Ihuan's. She was just born a few years later, but they were separated. Why couldn't he forget Ihuan? She felt bitter in her heart, and comforted him softly. "Why don't we go back to B-City?" Qin still did not make a sound. He stood there quietly by himself. After a long time, he suddenly turned around and walked out with large strides. Su Ilya was still standing there, and she looked a little disappointed. It didn't feel good to be rejected by a man. Yes, rejection. Qin had always rejected her advances, and she had wanted to give up many times, but she couldn't bear to before they made up. Qin's private plane returned to B-City that night, but when he returned, it was already 20 hours later in B-City. He went to the hospital, and Qin told him that Ihuan had been discharged from the hospital. Qin was silent for a long time. Qin made a cup of coffee and handed it to him. Then, he said calmly, "In fact, her health is already very bad. She needs to rest, stay in the hospital for a week, and then rest for half a year without worrying about anything." She paused for a moment and said with a serious expression, "Qin, I have to tell you something. Prepare your thoughts." Qin looked at her. Qin lowered his eyes and said softly, "Ihuan's body might not be suitable for pregnancy. Even if she gets pregnant, she won't be able to keep it. In the future, don't let her get pregnant." Qin didn't say anything, but his fingers that were holding the coffee cup were a little pale. They couldn't have children. He had once thought about having another child, not for the sake of inheritance, but for the sake of when they loved each other the most. But now it seemed to have failed. Qin closed his eyes slightly, and after a long time, he said softly, "Is there no other way?" Qin couldn't help but say, "Is this the point, Qin? You should think about how Ihuan can return to you first. You hurt her all over, and you still want to have a child." Qin opened his eyes and looked at his sister. His eyes were filled with coldness. Qin couldn't stand him anymore. She raised her hand and said, "I really admire you. Logically speaking, you and Big Brother like to raise children from young, but look at Big Brother. Cher is still a young girl, and Ihuan is as pale as a ghost." Although she was beautiful, Qin also felt sorry for her. After saying that, she glanced at her second brother's expression. Chapter 44-25. When Qin left the hospital, he went to Rongyu's place. Of course, he didn't go in. Instead, he looked out the window. Rongyu already had Ai Meng by his side. She was someone he was very familiar with. He didn't like or dislike her, but he was surprised by Rongyu's choice. Rongyu was good in all aspects. He should have a better choice. But when Chinamo left, he caught a glimpse of AI Mengming's side profile. She looked like He Huan. Thus, he understood why Rong Yu had chosen AI Mengming. He paused but didn't say anything in the end. When he returned to King Entertainment, he stopped suppressing Rong Yu's studio. After making this decision, he stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at his business empire. He had let Rong Yu off mainly for his own sake. Rong Yu and AI Mengming were like another Qin Mo and He Huan. Just let them be together. Qin Mo let out a long sigh. Just then, Secretary He came in. President Qin. Qin Mo turned sideways. Secretary He came over and said helplessly, "The company's revenue increased by 10% this quarter." She knew that this wasn't good news for Qin Mo. President Qin didn't lack money. He lacked women. Love turns to hate. Love turns to hate. This was exactly the case for this good-looking and rich man in front of her. Sure enough, CEO Qin was calm on the outside and on the inside. He just responded with a lazy and didn't say anything else. Secretary bit the bullet and said, "All right, the shares of Director He's cultural company dropped yesterday. If this continues, the future is bleak. President Qin, do you really want to continue?" Chinamo looked at Secretary He quietly. After a long while, his Adam's apple moved slightly. "Continue. Just don't let it go bankrupt." He wanted to continue until He Huan came to beg him. Actually, wealth wasn't important to the He family. He Huan had a lot of savings. But if it collapsed like this, mentally, he knew he had gone overboard, but he couldn't think of any other way. Everyone was well aware of this, especially his parents, who were very angry at his behavior. They said that he was crazy and did not care about the friendship between the two families. However, if he lost He Huan, what was the point of having a good relationship with her? Qin Mo admitted that he was crazy. Crazy for her. Secretary He stood at the side, stunned for a long time. Qin Mo asked her indifferently, "Do you know where He Huan is?" "She left the hospital." "How is she now?" Secretary He let out a long sigh. "I've asked around. Director He has used her connections to finance her father's cultural company. The investment is estimated to be several billion, and Director He might also invest in it herself. She might even put her own studio under the He family's cultural company." Of course, Qin Mo understood He Huan's intention. She wanted to fight him to the end. He looked at Secretary He. "You go out first." Secretary He stood where he was and looked hesitant. "President Qin, isn't this too much?" "Too much." Qin Mo smiled bitterly. "Do I have to watch her leave me?" Secretary He didn't dare to ask anymore and left first. Meanwhile, Qin Mo stood where he was and made a phone call. He Huan's year of hard work went down the drain. That night, the news of Don't Tell Her failing the censorship blew up on Weibo. It was the top 3 trending topics. Chapter 4426. Of course, all the companies and investors related to the movie were done for, including the He family's cultural company. Qin Mo was a businessman, and he knew how to take drastic measures. He Huan was easily beaten to the point where she couldn't fight back. But the consequences were severe. On the surface, King Entertainment's stock price even rose a lot, but Qin Mo wasn't happy. A week passed, and He Huan didn't seem to have any intention of begging for mercy. Instead, he could see news of her on the gossip. Just as Qin Shin said, she was pale and frail. It made his heart ache. Qin Mo had a bad habit of sitting in his office and looking at He Huan's photo for the whole night. Sometimes he would go out for a walk. She was living in that apartment now and never called him. It seemed like she didn't care about He Huan anymore. Qin Mo's car was parked in front of her apartment. The lights in her apartment were off. He sat in the car and waited quietly until she came back. She didn't come back alone. Beside her, there was a bodyguard who drove her back. With an expensive limousine and an elegant man, Qin Mo could tell at a glance that he was a rising star in the legal world. He had a good family background and good looks. Now, he ran the most prestigious law firm in B City and was Yi Mulin's direct junior. He Huan's motive for being with him was obvious. Qin Mo sat in the car and watched them quietly. The car window was open and he was smoking. Of course, He Huan could see him, but she pretended not to. She was very tired, so tired that she didn't have the energy to face him. She said goodbye to Bai Shualan and pulled on her jacket to go home. Lawyer Bai saw Qin Mo and went to greet him. The Bai surname was not bad, so Qin Mo had no reason to sit in the car. When he opened the door and got out, he glanced at Huan before responding to Bai Shualan. Lawyer Bai, long time no see. Yes, President Qin. I didn't expect to meet you here. Bai Shualan paused for a moment. But I might have to meet President Qin often in the future because I took on Ms. He's custody battle case. Qin Mo had already lost his patience. I'll leave it to my team of lawyers. As for my meeting with Lawyer Bai, I'll probably meet him as a man, right? He wasn't stupid. If it was a friend or work relationship, he would only ask his assistant to do it. He wouldn't be so gracious. It was obvious that this man wanted to pursue Huan. Now he knew what Qin Shen meant when he said that Huan didn't need a man at all times. Qin Mo just felt a little unlucky that she could find such a man in a lawsuit. Before one wave of rivals in love had subsided, another wave had arisen. Bai Shualan smiled slightly. President Qin is right. Men were very straightforward with their words, and this sentence almost admitted his intentions towards Huan. Qin Mo's expression would not be good. He stared at Bai Shualan, who didn't avoid it. Huan is a very cute girl. Qin Mo narrowed his eyes. She's in her early 30s. Oh, she's 3 years younger than me, Lawyer Bai said nonchalantly. He saw that Qin Mo was about to make a move, so he smiled and said that he would leave first. He didn't mind that Qin Mo was still there. A mature and confident man probably wouldn't mind this. They had been husband and wife before, so pursuing now was nothing. Chapter 44:27. After Bai Shualan left, Qin Mo stood there for a long time and smoked another cigarette. He raised his head and looked at Huan's apartment. The lights were still on. As long as the lights were on, he would not leave. He stood there for a long time. The winter night was cold, but he could not feel it. He only felt that his heart and lungs were warm. It was not a good feeling. It was painful. If he had a choice, he would rather give up. However, he could not give up now. So, to a certain extent, he hated her. And he hated himself. There was no turning back for Qin Mo, and he did not want to turn back. If it was painful, he would feel the pain until the end. Qin Mo stood downstairs for the whole night. Huan went out before 8 o'clock the next day. When she went downstairs, she saw Qin Mo's car. She hesitated for a moment, but still went over. Qin Mo sat in the car and smoked as he looked at her. You still haven't given up? You want to fight for Huan in court. You know you can't win, but you still decided to marry that pretty boy lawyer to get a bigger bargaining chip? Huan's expression was ugly. She bit her lip and glared at the despicable man in front of her. Her voice was a little hoarse. Qin Mo, you're despicable. I believe you haven't seen how despicable I am. He put out the cigarette. I can't bear to do anything to you. Huan stood in the cold wind. Her whole body was trembling. She did not know if it was because she was angry or because of the cold. After a long time, her voice was as cold as ice. Then, thank you, President Qin, for being merciful and leaving me with some warmth. Now, I thank you. As she said that, she turned around and left without looking back. She got in her car and drove away. Qin Mo sat there and lit another cigarette. Early that morning, Huan got into a car accident. It was not serious, but her hand was bruised. She needed a rest. The media made a big deal out of Su Ilio and Qin Mo for an entire day. Of course, Su Ilio, Qin Mo, and the others were also involved in the scandal. If Qin Mo did not say anything about public relations, no one would do it. In the evening, Qin Shen went to the ward. He looked at Huan's bandaged hand and sighed. You'll have to stay in the hospital for at least half a month. Huan, I'm not trying to scare you, but if you don't listen to me, your hand will have sequelae. Huan lowered his head and said nothing. I'm serious. You can't go out anymore. I'll talk to Qin Mo about your family. He's like a mad dog now. Qin Shen couldn't stand it anymore. Huan used to be so energetic and healthy. Although it was true that she was beautiful now, could she withstand a few more blows from Qin Mo? That was good enough. As Qin Shen spoke, he sighed again. Right at that moment, the ward door opened, and Bai Shualan, the lawyer, came in. When he came over, Huan naturally had to greet him. Since it was only her hand that was injured, it was no problem for her to get up. Thus, she went to the small living room to talk to him. Qin stood there for a while, making sure that the woman with the surname Bai treated him as a man. Moreover, as Huan's ex-sister-in-law, she could tell that Bai Shualan wanted to woo Huan. She was too immoral. It was just a lawsuit, but she wanted to steal her brother's girlfriend. Qin was wearing a white doctor's robe. She was 178 centimeters tall and looked elegant. Coupled with her short hair and androgynous facial features, it was easy for people to mistake her for a man. She walked over and placed her hands on Huan's shoulders. She leaned forward as if she wanted to touch Huan's hair and said in a low voice, "Didn't I tell you to rest more? Are you being disobedient again?" Chapter 44:28. Huan was stunned. She tilted her body and looked up at Qin. The relationship between them was indeed intimate, but it seemed to be different from usual. She was puzzled, but Lawyer Bai was even more surprised. This male doctor was very good-looking. He exuded a noble aura and didn't look like a doctor at all. He looked more like a male model. Moreover, he was very close to Huan, so close that it felt like they were close. They didn't look like a doctor and patient, but more like a couple. Lawyer Bai had to admit that this doctor and Huan looked very compatible. So he looked at Huan. Huan was also a little annoyed. She knew Qin's personality, so she explained awkwardly, "This is Dr. Qin Shun. He's very famous in the country." Bai Shualan was even more surprised when she said that. Of course, she had heard of Qin Shun, the world's leading surgeon and also Qin Mo's sister. But the person in front of her was obviously a male doctor. Bai Shualan wasn't an idiot, so she quickly understood what the doctor was trying to do. She just smiled and maintained her composure. Then, she passed a bouquet of white roses to Huan. "This is for the patient." Qin raised his eyebrows. What a clever confession. But he probably didn't know that Huan would be allergic when she was weak. Sure enough, Huan sneezed after taking a sniff of the flowers. Tears came out, and her nose turned red. It was a very ugly scene. Bai Shualan was still asked to leave by Dr. Qin on the grounds that he had hurt her patient. Of course, she knew how to deal with Huan's problem. She helped her spray some medicine on her nose and casually teased, "He looks like a good man." If Qin Mo knew, he knew. Huan leaned against the headboard and said softly. Qin looked at Huan and asked slowly, "What do you think?" Huan looked down. "Nothing. I just want Huan back and my parents to be safe." When she said this, Qin sighed again. You should also know Qin Mo's temper. Since he has chosen to shed all pretense of cordiality, he will go all the way. You must be mentally prepared. Now, she couldn't even persuade Huan. There was a feeling that Qin Mo had forced Huan into a desperate situation, and Qin Mo was the one in front of him. Behind her was a bottomless abyss. Qin could only take care of Huan and accompany her to relieve her boredom. There was also good news. Rongyu's condition had improved, and he had been discharged. He just had to come back once a week for a checkup. By the way, he and Ai Meng are married. They seem to have a good relationship. Qin sighed. They're already together. Isn't this world too fantastical? Huan was stunned for a moment, and then she looked down. It's good. Ai Meng is actually a very promising actress. Will you still use her if you have the chance? Qin took it as a casual chat. He walked over and stretched out his hand to let Huan lean on his shoulder. This was the strength of a boyfriend. The nurse was so envious that she cried. Indeed, Dr. Qin's shoulder only belonged to Director He. However, Huan did look adorable. She was small, fair, and fragile. The Qin siblings seemed to like her very much. In the nurse's mind, there was already a rich family drama. The main characters were Huan and the second generation of the Qin family. Chapter 44:29. Hearing Qin's question, Huan tilted her head and looked at her strangely. After a long while, she said in a low voice, "I don't even know if I can act anymore." She didn't know if she would have a chance. The storm this time was almost devastating. She wasn't so optimistic that the He family could get out of it unscathed. As his daughter, she would choose to advance and retreat together with him. Qinshin stared at her eyes for a long while and asked her in a low voice, "Do you hate Qin-mo?" Huan looked a little absent-minded. Then she lowered her eyes and said, "I don't know." How could Qinshin not know? But because she loved him, she hated him. She couldn't say anything, so she told him that she had to go and help other patients. She was about to leave when Huan stopped her. "Don't tell Qin-mo that I'm here." Qinshin had already walked to the door. He leaned to the side and turned his head. Then he smiled meaningfully. He probably knows by now. After finding out that there was an adulterer and a husband, Qin-mo would pay attention to Huan's movements from time to time. Yi Miyun and Qin-mo, these two brothers, had always fought together. They had never lost to anyone. It was just that their women were rather pitiful. After Qinshin said that, Huan's face turned pale again, but she didn't say anything else. Everything was quiet again. Qinshin paused for a moment and then left. As soon as she returned to her office, she received a call from Qin-mo. She sighed and said, "You know?" Qin-mo nodded. "Let me have dinner first. Is that all right? I haven't stopped working yet." Qinshin couldn't help but say, "Her phone remembered to bring you wonderful novels." However, as soon as she finished speaking, the door of her office was opened. Qin-mo walked in, followed by Qinshin's secretary, the nurse, whose face was red. President Qin was so handsome. Dr. Qin is also handsome, but President Qin is different. Dr. Qin was like a handsome man in a manga, but President Qin's masculinity couldn't be hidden even through his clothes. The young nurse suppressed the desire to scream in her heart and closed the door for them in a reserved manner. Qinshin is a little helpless. Is the entertainment industry going to close recently? Qin-mo, is that why you come to your sister again and again? Qin-mo glanced at her and then looked at Qinshin's lunch. It was so luxurious that it made him doubt his life. A doctor was so extravagant that he ate even better than the CEO of a company with a net worth of hundreds of billions. Everything was of the highest quality. This was not a working meal. This was clearly the most high-end Michelin cuisine. Looking at Qin-mo's eyes, Qinshin smiled. "Are you hungry? If you are, let's eat together. I'm afraid that you will drool. That will be ugly. After all, in addition to being the CEO of the entertainment industry, you are also a man who's going to be in his 40s. If you can't take care of your wife, eating a mouthful of food is nothing." Qin-mo smiled coldly. "Qinshin, when did you become so mean?" Qinshin smiled as he ate the food. "You're the one who's mean to your ex-wife. Do you want me to tell you one by one?" Qin-mo still stared at her. Qinshin smiled. Looking at his second brother's thin appearance, his heart softened. He pulled him over. "Eat a little. Huan's hand is injured and can't run away. She has to stay in a hospital this month unless her hand doesn't want to recover." "A month?" Qin-mo looked at her. Qinshin smiled. "Half a month. A month is for you." Chapter 44:30. However, it would be New Year's Day in 20 days. It was inhumane to stay in the hospital. Qin-mo looked at his sister. "Half a month. My mobile phone remembers to bring wonderful novels to you." Huan immediately understood that Qin-mo knew about Lawyer Bai's visit. She chuckled. "If she goes home, won't they be closer?" Qin-mo's voice was slightly hoarse. "She will only go to my place to recuperate." "Are you sure and certain?" Qinshin looked at his honorable second brother with a smile. "You're so confident. It just so happens that no one is taking care of Huan now. Why don't you take care of her?" Qin-mo was rendered speechless by her words and could only stare at his sister. Qinshin smiled. "Okay, let's eat. You seem to have lost a lot of weight recently. How are you going to pursue Huan if you don't eat?" Qin-mo glanced at her again. "At least you have some conscience." As he spoke, he really did eat something. Qinshin looked at him and said very slowly, "Second brother." Qinshin rarely called him that. Qin-mo looked up. Qinshin said very slowly, "Actually, even if Dad and Mom scolded you for being like this, I would still think that you're a mad dog. But we're family after all. Have you ever thought that if Huan were to make up her mind, the two of you would really be finished? She used to love you, so it might be better if you pester her more." Qin-mo immediately lost his appetite. He glared at his sister. "What are you thinking about every day? It's for your own good. Qinshan rarely showed her girly side. She walked over and hugged her second brother from behind. She rested her face on his shoulder and softly said, "Second brother, you must be happy. You must be well." Qin Mo's heart softened. Qinshan rarely acted like this. As soon as he opened his mouth, his voice was slightly hoarse. "What's wrong?" Qin closed his eyes. "I'm worried about you." Qin Mo felt very upset. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, "I'll be fine. I'm afraid that you'll be alone for the rest of your life." Qinshan's voice was low and deep, and he sighed with emotion. It was also a little hateful. Qin Mo turned his head. He was a little angry at first, but when he saw the expression on Qinshan's face, Qinshan was really worried about him. He let out a long breath and said in a low voice, "I won't." Qinshan looked at him. "Really?" Qin Mo smiled and patted her face. "Of course not." When Qinshan wanted to move away, the chief of surgery happened to have surgery to discuss with Qinshan, so he came to discuss it. Unfortunately, there were a few assistant nurses behind him. As soon as the door was pushed open, they saw Qin Mo patting Qinshan's face. Everyone knew that they were brother and sister, but Qinshan's appearance was really very neutral, so the scene became indescribably classic. The deputy chief opened his mouth like a crocodile, and the young nurses behind him covered their faces and wanted to scream. This scene was really too fucking cute. Qinshan heard the movement behind him and turned his head. Seeing their expressions, he knew what they were thinking. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. It was also a kind of trouble for people to be too good-looking. Seeing that she had something to do, Qin Mo didn't stay any longer. "I'll leave first. Don't you want to eat?" Qinshan called him and sat down, holding his hand. Qin Mo's eyes darkened. "I'll go see Huan." Qinshan smiled and didn't say anything else. On the other side, Qin Mo went out and broke the hearts of the young nurses. Chapter 44:31. When Qin Mo walked out, he broke the hearts of all the young nurses. They also want to see the two handsome men together. Although Qinshan was a woman, it didn't affect them from the perspective of appreciation. The young nurses were ready for the next scream. Qinshan looked at the group of young nurses and could not help but roll his eyes again. Being too good-looking was really a kind of trouble. While she was discussing the surgery with the deputy chief physician, Qin Mo went to the ward. He Huan was still in the ward, and there were two specialized nurses taking care of her. He didn't go in immediately. Instead, he stood outside and watched her quietly. "My mobile phone remembers to bring wonderful novels to you." Huan was also eating. She declined a nurse's offer to feed her and chose to eat with her left hand. Of course, it was very inconvenient for her to eat with her left hand, but she still insisted on eating with her left hand. Even though she ate very slowly, she still looked a little awkward. Sometimes, she would be lost in thought for a while. No one knew what she was thinking about. Qin Mo wondered if she would think of him when she was in a daze. But he smiled bitterly. Even if she wanted to, she would probably be gnashing her teeth in hatred. Qin Mo quietly watched for a while, then pushed the door open and went in. The nurses all knew him. Shen Yuan was under Yi Muyun's name, and Dr. Qin was Qin Mo's sister. Who didn't know Qin Mo's name? When he came in, the nurse hesitated for a moment before leaving. Yuan looked up and saw that Qin Mo had closed the door. She stared at him blankly and put down the spoon in her hand. Her tone was extremely indifferent. "Why are you here?" Qin Mo walked towards her and said in a hoarse voice, "I heard that your hand was injured, so I came to have a look." "Thank you for your concern, President Qin. I think if President Qin had shown mercy, I wouldn't have had a car accident. Isn't it unnecessary for President Qin to come over now?" Yuan said coldly. Qin Mo had already walked to her side. He sat on the edge of the bed and reached for her set meal. To be honest, Qinshan took good care of her. Whatever Qinshan ate, Yuan ate too. Looked very delicious. Yuan was a little wary when he took it from her. "What do you want?" Compared to her sharpness, Qin Mo seemed much gentler. He said hoarsely, "I'll feed you." He paused for a moment and said, "Don't force yourself if your hands are inconvenient. It's not embarrassing to let the nurse feed you." Yuan glared at him. "It's none of your business. I'll eat by myself." He maintained his original posture and looked at her quietly. Lucian culture probably won't be able to hold on for much longer. If you want to see it go bankrupt on the day you leave the hospital, I won't object. Huan was still glaring at him. There was hurt and anger in her eyes. She had never known that a person could be so heartless to another person, to be so ruthless and ruthless to such an extent. She didn't want to compromise, but the annoying truth told her that he would really do it. Huan didn't eat immediately. She looked at him quietly. "Chinamo, what on earth are you going to do?" He began to feed her and said calmly, "You know what I said I wanted? Impossible." She looked down. "Chinamo, we're over." She couldn't accept the women who appear from time to time. This time it was Su Ilio. Next time he was unhappy. Who would be by his side? Ai Jia or another woman? Her voice was so low that it sounded like she was whispering. "Chinamo, I don't want to go on like this anymore. Let me go and let yourself go, okay?" Chinamo smiled gently. "But who will let me go?" Chapter 4432. After Chinamo said that, there was a moment of silence in the air. After a long time, Huan finally said in a low voice, "No one won't let you go. It's you who won't let yourself go." "Is that really the case?" Chinmo's voice was a little cold. "Huan, is that what you think?" She said yes. There was a very subtle indifference in the air. Chinmo's expression was not good, but he seemed to be suppressing something. However, he finally restrained himself and continued to feed her. Huan was unwilling, and his attitude was a little overbearing. Now that things had come to this, if Huan still compromised, she wouldn't be Huan. He was pressuring her, and he was almost unscrupulous. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore. After a few pestering, she couldn't take it anymore and smashed the bowl in his hand. There was a crisp sound, as if something had broken. It sounded like a bowl, but it didn't. It was the relationship between them that had broken. Chinamo looked at the broken pieces on the ground and the precious ingredients on the ground. It was as if she had smashed his heart into pieces. Huan knew what he was thinking. There was a sneer in her eyes, and she said in a low voice, "Perhaps you think that this is a gift to me, but Chinamo, I have never needed this kind of care. Save your care and warmth for other women. I will stand with my father. Even if the He family goes bankrupt, I will never compromise." Chinamo was still looking at her. Huan's expression became even more terrible. "I can't accept this kind of love and affection from you." Chinamo stared at the ground for a long time. Then he slowly stood up and said very softly, "What if I insist on making you accept it?" Huan didn't want to talk to him. She closed her eyes and said, "That will depend on President Qin's ability." "Oh yes, if you insist on doing something, I will choose to get married to fight for custody of Huan." After she said that, Chinmo's expression was quite terrible. He stared at her little face, not letting go of the subtle expressions on her face. He asked her word by word, "Do you really think that way?" Huan replied coldly, "Yes." Chinmo smiled. His smile was very gentle. He even moved closer and said in a low and hoarse voice, "Then, whichever man you have an affair with, I will destroy him. I want to see how cold-hearted you are." Huan looked up at him. Yes, this was the Qin M.O. she was familiar with. He used his power and money to control her. Whether she loved him or not, she had no choice. And she was also tired. She agreed and slowly lay down, as if she did not intend to continue talking to him. Qin M.O. was still looking at her, and his voice became hoarser. "I'll make you beg me." He finally left. After Huan left, the young nurses finally dared to come over and clean up the debris in the ward. When they asked Huan if she wanted to eat something, Huan turned her back and said in a choked voice, "No, you guys can take it." The young nurses looked at each other and did not dare to say too much. However, they still told the matter to Qin Shun. Dr. Qin drank her cup of coffee and sighed. "My second brother likes to force women. Isn't it good to coax women?" She thought about it and asked the nurse, "How is Huan?" "Missy is in a bad mood and does not want to talk," the nurse said softly. Qin Shun nodded. "If I'm at such a pig head, I would not want to talk either. It's just a meal. Is there a need to threaten other people's lives? Besides, it's not like he doesn't know Huan's personality." Chapter 4433. Huan stayed in the hospital, and the news from the outside was getting worse and worse. It was very likely that Lushan culture was going to close down. Just thinking about it gave her a chill. She didn't understand why he needed to raise their relationship to the family. Kaim and Su Chang came to see her. She comforted her father, and Kaim was very open-minded. Huan, as long as you make up your mind, Dad and Mom will always be on your side. He sighed again. Glory, splendor, wealth, and rank are just fleeting clouds. Your mother and I have long been indifferent to it. As long as you are happy and safe. As for the things you don't want to do, don't do them. If you really can't do it, your mother and I will move to a small town. It won't be a problem for me to find a job to support our family. Huan listened in a daze. Her heart was filled with mixed feelings. She looked up, and there was a trace of tears in her eyes. When she opened her mouth, her voice was also hoarse. Dad, I'm sorry for implicating you. At this age, she still had to suffer. Huan wanted to be confident, but she knew that she couldn't protect herself. Of course, she could go abroad, but a Chinese director was suppressed in China. It was not hard to imagine what would happen in the future. Huan didn't dare to be optimistic, and she couldn't be optimistic. She could only recover from her illness and fight against Qin Mo's custody. In fact, she knew that she couldn't win, but to a certain extent, she hoped to use this lawsuit to get something back. In her heart, she also knew that she had let Huan down. It wasn't that she didn't want her, but that she couldn't get her. Huan was silent. Su Cheng sighed. What implicating? We are a family. Don't your father and I have the backbone to exchange you for glory, splendor, wealth, and rank? Huan pursed her lips. Su Cheng continued. It's just 3 meals a day. It's not a big deal, even if it's just a simple meal. Besides, she had eaten in prison. Now that the family was together, there was nothing to be afraid of. With his parents' support, Huan didn't say anything else. As a mother herself, Su Qing knew what Huan was thinking. She thought for a moment and said in a low voice, Huan, do your best. We'll support you. I know she's a sore spot for you. Now that you've fallen out with Qin and Mo, if you can't get custody of Huan, you won't be happy in the future. Mom, I know. Huan's eyes were watery. I'll try my best. Su Chen came over and reached out to stroke her straight black hair. Her voice was very gentle. I hope that you can be happy. In the future, you will have the chance to find someone you like. Actually, how could she not know that it was very difficult? After the incident with Qin and Mo, Huan wouldn't be easily moved. Lawyer Bai was a good person, but Huan's attitude was still rather cold. As parents, they had endless worries. On the other side, an unexpected person came to visit Huan. He carefully pushed open the door of the ward and poked his head out. Huan was alone, with 2 nurses accompanying her. The moment she turned around, she saw AI Meng Meng. She was a little surprised. Why are you here? AI Meng Meng pursed her lips and looked even more cautious. I heard that you were injured, so I came to visit. Huan nodded. Thank you. Because AI Meng Meng had done something to Huan previously, she couldn't let it go. Huan smiled faintly. What's that in your hand? Is it for me? Chapter 4434. AI Meng Meng immediately said, This is the soup I made. It wasn't very good at first, but Rongyu helped to make it taste better. I don't know if it's to your liking. Huan smiled. I'll know after I try it, but I know that Rongyu is a good cook. AI Meng Meng was not so nervous anymore. She walked over and carefully took the soup and poured a small bowl. Seeing that Huan's hands were not convenient, she said that she would feed it to her. Surprisingly, Huan did not refuse and drank a bowl. It tastes good. Huan smiled. I'll drink the rest tonight. AI Meng Meng was excited, but she tried her best to suppress it. Huan was calm. I heard that you and Rongyu got married. I've been busy and haven't had time to buy a gift. No, you don't need it. AI Meng Meng's face turned red. Director your blessing is the best gift. Huan smiled again. Why are you so nervous? AI Meng Meng's expression was unnatural. After a while, she said in a low voice, It's because my past was very bad. Huan smiled. Since you said it's the past, then forget it. People have to look forward. It's not good to dwell on the past. AI Meng Meng was stunned for a while before she said in a low voice, Director, he is right. He-Huan smiled. You and Roan, you can call me He-Huan from now on. AI Ming's lips moved, and she nodded. He-Huan smiled and did not say anything else. AI Ming was stunned for a while before she left. He-Huan sat alone in the ward with nothing to do. She looked at the bowl of soup again. After thinking carefully, he called his assistant and asked her to pick a gift for him. It was not very expensive, about 100,000 yuan, and he sent it to Rong Yu and AI Ming's home. It was past 3 in the afternoon when He-Huan's assistant came to deliver the gift. Rong Yu accepted it calmly and thanked him. After a while, he sent the guests away and gave the exquisite box to AI Ming. He-Huan gave it to you. Take it. AI Ming was a little uneasy and hesitated. It's for us. Wedding gifts are usually things that girls like. It can't be for me, right? Rong Yu smiled and threw the gift into her hands. Open it. AI Ming looked at him again and carefully opened it. There was a box inside. It was quite exquisite. When he opened it, he saw a crystal set of the 12 zodiac animals. They were very beautiful and cute. It's very pretty. AI Ming liked it very much. She looked up at Rong Yu. I like it very much. I put it in my bedroom. There was a cabinet in their bedroom. Rong Yu had a collection of ornaments, and she could clean up a small space to put in. After she finished speaking, she ran over. Rong Yu looked at her from behind with an indescribable look in his eyes. He followed her and saw that she had cleaned up a place and solemnly placed the 11 little crystal creatures there. It was a little out of place with some of the things he collected. It was even a little ridiculous, but he felt that it was very good. The truly good quality of a marriage and relationship is that there is no distinction between the parties. Where he was, there was a place for her. That was it. AI Ming put it away and turned her head. What do you think? Rong Yu looked at it and smiled. Very good. Chapter 44:35. Later on, he hugged her from behind. He didn't say a word and just rested his head on her shoulder. AI Ming bit her lip and said in a low voice, Rong Yu. Her voice was gentle, but there was also a hint of helplessness in it. She sounded like a young lady in love, but at the same time, she sounded as shy as a newlywed wife in ancient times. Rong Yu said softly, I just want to hug you. We're husband and wife, so hugging is normal, isn't it? She felt that it was, but she also felt that it wasn't. In short, they were a little flustered and at a loss as to what to do. After all, they had only been confused once. They had only known each other for a few days, and they knew nothing about each other. They did not understand each other at all. Ming thought about a lot, but Rong Yu only repeated, Ming, I'm your husband. Later on, he kissed her. She thought about the word husband vaguely as she was kissed. Later on, he fulfilled his duty as a husband. Actually, AI Ming felt that it was a little unbelievable. Qin appeared in He-Huan's ward. She checked the condition of He-Huan's hand. Then, she thought for a moment and coughed. How are you and Qin Mo? He-Huan was stunned. Nothing. Qin didn't say anything else and suggested, let's go take an x-ray. Although He-Huan's hand was injured, Qin still pushed her to take the x-ray, which made the nurses jealous. Dr. Qin was the Prince Charming of the entire hospital. Usually, just a smile from him was enough to make them fall for him for an entire day, let alone pushing him like this. He-Huan didn't feel that way. She had grown up in the Qin family and was used to the Qin siblings. After the x-ray was taken, there wasn't much of a problem. She just had to be careful not to drive or play the piano, and it was best not to do delicate or rough work. Qin looked at his ex-sister-in-law and smiled faintly. You could be discharged, but you can't run around after you're discharged. I don't want you to have a more serious injury than the last time I treated you. He-Huan bit her lower lip and said nothing in the end. Qin sighed. He-Huan, just bow down to my brother. You won't get the upper hand if you fight him head-on. He's completely crazy now. He-Huan looked down. If I give in, will he let me and my parents go? Or can you return He-Huan to me? Qin sighed. Is it really impossible for you? Sitting in the wheelchair, He-Huan stood up after a while. She smiled faintly and said, Qin, do you know? In the past, I used to think that self-esteem wasn't that important. I just wanted to live the life that I got. But now, I can't back down anymore. I don't know how to live with him anymore. To him, I'm just someone he likes, not Ihuan. Qin Shun played dumb. It's the same in between, right? Ihuan looked at Qin Shun speechlessly, but she didn't explain. Anyway, Qin Shun would still pretend not to understand. In the end, Qin Shun helped her get discharged and sent her home personally. There was no one else who received such treatment. The expensive sports car slowly stopped in front of the apartment. It was a limited edition sports car, and there was only one in the entire B city. It was at Qin Shun's place. Qin Shun helped Ihuan open the car door. As soon as Ihuan got out of the car, she saw a Mulsan parked in front of her. Chapter 4436. Ihuan looked at Qin Shun. Qin Shun shrugged. It's just a coincidence. She wouldn't tell him that she had received 50 million yuan as a bribe, or Ihuan would probably ignore her in the future. She coughed and said, I still have something to do at the hospital, so I'll be leaving first, Ihuan. Remember to use your right hand less, and it's best to hire a nanny at home. Ihuan pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Qin Shun felt guilty. It wasn't easy to accept 50 million yuan. In fact, it wasn't that she was greedy, she just hoped that they could reconcile, and that was it. Well, it definitely had nothing to do with greed. Qin Shun convinced herself. How could a handsome man like her feel guilty? She quickly got in the car and drove away. Ihuan watched her leave and wanted to go back to her apartment. She really had a lot of things to do. Chinamo got out of the car and stopped her. Let's talk. She looked up at the man in front of her, and after a long while, she said in a hoarse voice, What do you want to talk about? We can talk about Lushan culture, Ihuan, and us. Chinamo lowered his head and said in a very gentle voice, which was a very humble attitude. If it were in the past, Ihuan would have refused immediately, but Ihuan thought of Qin Shen's words. She gently clenched her fingers and then smiled at Qin Mo. Okay, let's talk. She entered the elevator first, and Qin Mo followed her. The two stood in the elevator in silence until the elevator door opened. His voice was a little hoarse. Open the door. Ihuan swiped the key and led him into her apartment. The apartment was the same as before. Nothing had changed, but it seemed a little lonely because no one had lived there for many days. Qin Mo went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. When he turned back, Ihuan was leaning on the sofa in a daze. He put the water beside her hand and sat opposite her. When the sofa sank, Ihuan glanced at him and said softly, What do you want to talk about? Come back to me, he said straightforwardly. Ihuan was still leaning against the sofa. After a long time, she chuckled softly. She was a little absent-minded, but she slowly recovered. Can you let go of my dad's company? Can you let my movie be released as scheduled? Can you let Ihuan come back? Of course, he said firmly. I can make it up to you. Compensation? Ihuan chuckled softly. She seemed to be in a trance. She didn't say anything else. She just said that she was a little tired and wanted to rest for a while. However, while she was resting, Chinamo did not intend to let her go. He quickly and quietly approached her. Ihuan's back was facing him. I'm very tired. Chinamo seemed to sigh. He just trapped her under his body and kissed her for a while. When he kissed her, Ihuan did not resist, but she did not respond to him either. However, this was enough for Qin Mo. She eventually fell asleep. Qin Mo got up to deal with some business. He still hadn't solved the crisis of Lu Sheng and Ihuan's movie, let alone Ihuan. He was a businessman. He had to see Ihuan's sincerity if this was a business deal. When Ihuan woke up, it was already nightfall. She called home without telling Qin Mo that she was with him. Then, she learned that the crisis was still there. When she hung up the phone, she was in a daze for a while. Of course, she knew what Qin Mo meant. It was a business deal. She had to show him some sincerity. He had always made full use of his advantages and never showed mercy. Chapter 4437. Just as she was in a daze, Qin Mo pushed the door open and entered. He had already taken off his jacket and was wearing a pair of black casual pants and a beige sweater. He looked very comfortable and casual. Ihuan was stunned again. She remembered that he didn't wear this before. However, she didn't ask. She just looked at him with a hint of wariness in her eyes. Chin Mo wasn't blind. Of course, he could tell. However, he quietly went over to open the curtains. It was already dusk outside. The street lights were on, and it looked very prosperous from here. Chin Mo stood there and turned to look at Ihuan quietly. She had indeed lost weight again. Just like what Qin Shin said, she was very fragile and could arouse a man's desire to protect her. Did that Bai Shulan also see her like this? And that's why she was infatuated with a married woman, disregarding her identity? Qin Mo was a little angry, but he held it in and asked her calmly if she was hungry. He said that he had prepared dinner. Ihuan still looked at him. What are you trying to say? He walked over and bent down to look at her quietly. Then he kissed her on the lips. Let's eat. We'll talk about it after we're done eating. Or you can think about it. Didn't you make a phone call just now? Ihuan looked down. How did you know? I know everything about you. He bent down and kissed her again. His voice was a little hoarse. All right, get up and eat. You're too thin. He carried her out of the bed. The heater in the house was turned on, so it wasn't cold outside. Moreover, he had put a thick sweater on her. Ihuan was carried to the dining room outside. He placed her on a chair, and she looked at the table full of dishes. There were 6 to 7 of them, and they were all nourishing dishes that she liked. She knew that he had put in a lot of effort into them. Qin Mo scooped a bowl of chicken soup for her and placed it in front of her. Jade bamboo chicken soup, your favorite. Ihuan looked up at him and said softly, Actually, there's no need to cook so many dishes. Qin Mo smiled. It's rare for us to eat together. I'll take you to the villa tomorrow morning. There will be 2 specialized aunties to cook. Will Aunt Lon come? She asked. Qin Mo's ink-like eyes stared at her. After a while, he smiled faintly. I won't. It's just the 2 of us. I transferred the auntie here from somewhere else. She won't disturb us. Ihuan wasn't stupid. She knew that he was controlling and monitoring her in disguise. He had found his own people, but she didn't say anything. She just quietly drank her soup. Qin Mo's culinary skills were excellent, but he didn't cook often. Ihuan rejected him, but she didn't reject his cooking. She also knew that even if she ran around outside for 24 hours, it was not as good as 1 or 2 phone calls from Qin Mo, so she was safe here, waiting for him to make a move. She also knew that there was a price to pay, and that price was herself. Qin Mo looked at her quietly. He watched her finish the bowl of soup, then scooped a bowl of rice for her and prepared some vegetables. Eat more. Ihuan lowered her eyes and agreed. She pursed her lips and continued to eat the food in the bowl in silence. They were together. They had known each other since they were young. They had been husband and wife for so many years. They had so many intimate pasts, but now that they were together, they were like strangers, restricted, unfamiliar, uneasy, and nervous. It filled their surroundings. Chapter 44:38. When the meal was finally over, Qin Mo carried her back to the master bedroom and cleaned up. When he returned to the master bedroom, Ihuan was leaning against the headboard and watching TV. In fact, apart from her fractured hand, her body was even weaker. He looked at her for a while and said hoarsely, I'll wash up and sleep later. I'll probably be up at 11 o'clock. Ihuan's eyes were on the TV, but she said to him, I'll wait for you. Qin Mo's body trembled, and the color of his eyes deepened, darker than the night. He naturally knew what she meant. As a married couple, he couldn't help but move his Adam's apple uncontrollably, and his voice was hoarse. I'll be early. Ihuan's eyes were still on the TV, as if she was very focused. But if he looked closely, he would find that she was nervous. Qin Mo clenched his fingers, looked at her for a while, and then left. He went to the study, but he didn't deal with work immediately. Instead, he just sat there and smoked quietly. After smoking for a long time, he didn't let out a long breath until the cigarette box was empty. When did it become a deal between them? Qin Mo rubbed the cigarette box, sat there for a while, and then got up and walked out. As for work, it could go to hell. When he returned to the master bedroom, it was already past 10:30. He thought that Ihuan was asleep, but she wasn't. She was still watching TV, and it was actually a children's program. Why aren't you sleeping? He looked at the faint shadow under her eyes and asked hoarsely. Yi-Hwan turned off the TV and looked up at him. Waiting for you. These 3 words crushed all of Qin Mo's self-control, and he couldn't even say ordinary words. After a long time, he finally found his voice. I'll go take a shower first. Yi-Hwan sat quietly and watched him walk into the bathroom with a bathrobe. She listened to the sound of him taking a shower and the sound of the water flowing. After about 10 minutes, Qin Mo walked out, wearing a white bathrobe, and the ends of his black hair were dripping with water. He dried his hair and said casually, "You're ready to sleep?" Afraid that she didn't understand, he added, "Sleep early if you're not feeling well." Yi-Hwan stared at him for a long time before finally lying down. Qin Mo dried his hair, but he didn't go to bed immediately. Instead, he went outside to smoke a cigarette and drink a glass of red wine. When he came back, Yi-Hwan was already asleep. His brows furrowed slightly. In fact, he knew that Yi-Hwan was exhausted and she was just waiting for him. Or waiting for him to make a decision. Qin Mo reached out and gently stroked her face. His voice was extremely hoarse. "Do you hate me that much? Are you afraid of me? Are you always so reluctant to be with me now? Do I have to use conditions to even touch you?" As he spoke, there was a hint of bitterness on his face. Finally, he slowly lay down. Lying beside her, he lay quietly for a while. Then he felt that her breathing seemed to quicken a little. He knew that she was awake, so he tilted his head. "Are you afraid of me?" "No." Yi-Hwan's voice was low. "I'm not afraid of you." Qin Mo's voice was even more hoarse. "Put your head on my shoulder. I'll believe you." Yi-Hwan bit her lip and finally put her head on his shoulder. Of course, it was a little stiff. Qin Mo's voice was a little hoarse. "Sleep." He didn't do anything to her. He just lay straight. He thought that he was actually angry. He was angry that she didn't love him anymore. Chapter 4439. Qin Mo lay there quietly. He didn't say anything for a long time, nor did he fall asleep. As for Yi-Hwan, her body was stiff as she slowly fell asleep. Qin Mo looked at her quietly. After a long time, he slowly closed his eyes. He couldn't fall asleep, but his breathing became calmer with her by his side. Eventually, he fell asleep unknowingly. After that, he had a dream. He dreamed of many things. They were all about him and Yi-Hwan when they were young and what happened on their wedding night. Later, Qin Mo woke up. When he woke up, it was a winter night. Yi-Hwan was sleeping soundly beside him. He looked at her face quietly. Later, he couldn't fall asleep, so he got up, put on a bathrobe, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window outside. Through the window, he saw the gentle snow falling from the night sky. The snowflakes fell on the window, and the shape of the snowflakes was especially beautiful. He looked at it quietly. After a long time, he reached out a finger and touched it gently. Through the layer of glass, the snowflakes melted. He thought that perhaps he should wake Yi-Hwan up to look at the snowflakes in the past. But now, he actually felt that it was nice to look at her alone. It was sad and beautiful. She was sleeping peacefully, not far from his side. Qin Mo stood there for about half an hour. When he returned to the bedroom, it was almost 4 o'clock. He lay down. Because his body was a little cold, Yi-Hwan moved away instinctively. He waited for his body to warm up before pulling her into his arms. With his chin on her shoulder, Yi-Hwan woke up, but she didn't make a sound. She just stayed in his arms obediently. After a long time, he finally spoke. His voice was low and hoarse. "Yi-Hwan, can you feel the pain?" She didn't make a sound. She would lose if she did. She just leaned against him quietly and didn't say anything. After a long time, she fell asleep again. When she woke up in the morning, Qin Mo was no longer in bed. The curtains were open. The light was a little dazzling. Yi-Hwan was startled. She almost jumped off the bed and ran to the window. Sure enough, it was snowing outside. It was white. She opened her eyes and looked outside. The snow was thick and it was still falling. There was a thick layer of fog on the glass. She reached out and wrote down Yi-Hwan's name. She thought of the little Yi-Hwan living alone. Just thinking about it made her throat feel blocked, and she felt indescribably uncomfortable. Her slender fingers wrote Qin Yi-Hwan's name over and over again. She realized that she missed Yi-Hwan so much. He missed her so much. Qin Mo stood at the door of the master bedroom, and saw He Huan standing by the window in a daze. She was only wearing a thin nightgown. He took a nightgown and draped it over her. Then he carried her and placed her on his feet. "Aren't you cold, standing like this?" he asked in a low voice. He Huan seemed to be stunned for a moment before she murmured, "Fortunately, it's snowing. It's midnight." He sighed softly. "I'll carry you back." He carried her to the living room. He turned on the heater and covered her with a woolen blanket. She could sit on the sofa and watch the snow outside. There was a cup of fruit tea beside her hand. He Huan's fingertips were warm. It was as if love and marriage were within reach. If she wanted to, she would be able to touch them immediately. But she lowered her eyes. It wasn't that she didn't want to convince herself, but she couldn't. "What are you thinking about?" Qin and Mo asked her in a low voice. Chapter 4440. He Huan looked at the snow outside quietly. Qin and Mo seemed to have gone for breakfast. After a while, the aroma of food wafted in the air. A warm house, snow outside the window, and a handsome man. All of this could be said to be a lifelong dream for ordinary women, but He Huan didn't think so. She was afraid. She was extremely afraid of Qin and Mo. She didn't know what he was going to do next. She held the fruit tea in her hands and smelled the fragrance. It seemed that she could only calm down. He didn't hug her last night. She didn't know if it was because he wasn't satisfied with her. She had lost a lot of weight after the miscarriage. Her body was almost broken, and her face was as pale as a ghost. Men probably didn't have any feelings for her, right? If that was the case, why did he want to keep her by his side? He Huan couldn't understand. She thought that perhaps it was a man's possessiveness. She had been his wife, so he didn't want anyone else to touch her, not even a little. Or maybe he raised her at home. She didn't need to work or socialize, and he would raise a few women outside in the future. Was that what Qin and Mo thought? He Huan was stunned. Qin and Mo came over, and his warm breath enveloped her. He wrapped his arms around her shoulders and lowered his head to kiss her hair. In a low voice, he asked, "What are you thinking about?" He Huan bit her lower lip and subconsciously asked him what was on his mind. Qin Mo's expression changed. He looked at her quietly, and after a long time, he turned her face and kissed her. After the kiss, he reached out to carry her and walked to the master bedroom. 10,000 words were omitted. When she woke up again, it was already noon. He Huan opened her eyes. Qin and Mo was already gone. She closed her eyes and thought about what had happened that morning. Of course, she wasn't reminiscing about it, but thinking about why he... Just as she was thinking, Qin and Mo walked in and bent down to kiss her. "Get up for lunch." She was too thin now and felt like a feather. But compared to before, each had their own taste. Of course, he wouldn't say that to her now. It would be too distant, and he was still angry. It was impossible for He Huan to pretend to be asleep. She sat up and stared blankly at Qin and Mo. "I'll wait for you outside. Go wash your face." He kissed her cheek in a husky voice and walked straight out. He Huan quietly watched his back for a long time before going to wash her face. What she found strange was that even though she had used up all her energy, her spirit was much better than before. The food he cooked was still very delicious. She ate a little too much, and even her pale face had a trace of color. After eating, Qin and Mo carried her to the sofa to watch TV or watch the snow. Seeing that he took out his laptop and seemed to be dealing with work, He Huan couldn't help but ask, "Don't you need to go to the company? I'll stay with you for the next few days, at least until the snow stops." He had already turned on the screen and said in a low voice, "Also, I wanted to use the helicopter to return to the villa, but the snow is too heavy. Let's stay here for a few days." More importantly, there was no one else here, just the two of them. Qin and Mo quietly thought that they might be able to cultivate some feelings for each other. He Huan replied with an "oh," and then didn't say anything else. She didn't want to watch TV, so she turned it off. In the quiet space, there was only the sound of Qin and Mo typing on the keyboard. Chapter 4441. After an unknown period of time, Qin and Mo said, "I've made the call. Lusheng culture has been restored. In addition, your movie will be screened on 214, and the number of seats will be around 40. After the new year, You can also promote it when you're well. However, I've arranged most of the things for you. You don't have to work too hard. He could even spend $1 billion in the box office for her and buy a few big prizes. If she wanted to make a name for herself or anything else, he could help her do it, no matter how she filmed it. After Qin and Mo finished speaking, Huan was stunned for a moment before she thanked him softly. Qin and Mo, on the other hand, smiled faintly and said, "No need for thanks." There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. He had achieved his goal, and she was also gentle to him. Even this morning, she did not resist or reject him at all. However, there was something missing. Without love, there would be less hatred. In the past, Huan did not really care about him, but when they came back once a year, she was not like this. Now, her heart was more like still water. Qin and Mo even had a trace of fear. He was afraid that they would never be able to return. After that, they did not say anything. It seemed that it would be useless to say anything. Huan did not call back to confirm, because she knew that Qin and Mo would do what she had done. After watching the snowy scenery for a while, she said that she was tired and wanted to sleep. Qin and Mo carried her up and gently placed her on the soft bed. She was indeed exhausted, not just from this morning, but from the past few months when she fell asleep. Qin Mo quietly watched her for a long time before he left to deal with his work. At about 4 o'clock, Huan's phone rang. Qin and Mo took a look. It was a WeChat message from a lawyer with the surname Bai. It said that he was outside and was here to deliver a document. At the same time, he wanted to visit the patient who had just been discharged. Qin and Mo used Huan's fingerprint to unlock the phone and replied, "I'll open the door for you." After sending the message, he set another alarm clock just a minute later and went outside. Outside, Bai Shuilan brought a bunch of hyacinths to ensure that Huan would not be allergic. However, when the door opened, it was Qin Mo's face. Bai Shuilan was surprised and shocked, so she was speechless for a long time. Compared to Lawyer Bai's shock, Qin and Mo was gentlemanly. "Lawyer Bai, please come in." He turned to let the guest in and said lightly, "Huan just woke up from her afternoon nap. I'll call her out." At the same time, Huan's alarm successfully woke her up. She sat up and heard someone talking outside. When she took a closer look, she realized it was Lawyer Bai. Huan grabbed her hair and looked at her phone. Then, she realized that it was Lawyer Bai's voice. Not only did Qin and Mo use her phone to peek at her messages, he even replied. More importantly, she was sleeping, and Bai Shuilan came over. But no matter how angry she was, she had to go and meet the guest. Bai Shuilan's work of work. Huan put on her home clothes and went out. It was actually a little rude, but staying in the bedroom for too long was even more rude. When she went out, Bai Shuilan looked at her. Qin Mo turned back and said with a smile, "Go back and put on your slippers." Huan looked down and realized that she didn't have shoes on her feet. She had forgotten. Biting her lower lip, she immediately ran back. When she came out again, the two men were sitting on the sofa and chatting. The atmosphere was harmonious, but Huan knew that it was all an illusion. Chapter 44-42. Huan walked over. Lawyer Bai. The location was different, the person was different, and the name was different too. In the past, she would occasionally call him Bai Shuilan. Lawyer Bai looked at Huan and smiled. "I'm here to deliver the indictment, but now, do you still need it?" Huan sat down next to Qin and Mo. She picked up the indictment and read it for a while. There was a hint of confusion in her eyes. It was an expression that Huan had not seen since she was young. When she was confused, Bai Shuilan kept staring at her eyes, not letting go of any expression on her face. At this moment, Qin and Mo stood up gracefully. "I'm going to the study to take care of some business. You guys talk." The atmosphere was very strange. After all, the main character of the indictment was Qin and Mo. Now that the couple was living together again, he seemed a little unnecessary. At this moment, Qin and Mo left, and the atmosphere was much more relaxed. Huan poured him another cup of tea. Bai Shuilan really liked her. After some thought, she asked, "Did you do it willingly?" Huan smiled faintly. "I didn't have a choice." Perhaps Bai Shuilan was a good choice, but she couldn't afford Huan. She was like this now, and her family was like this. She was no longer the proud and willful little princess. Without Qin and Mo, she was nothing. Even if she could fly, Mo would end her freedom and break her wings. Perhaps she would never be able to fly again in this lifetime, but she was unwilling. However, she wouldn't tell Bai Shulan about this. She was just talking to him politely about business. It was not convenient to talk about personal matters. After the discussion, it was already dusk. Bai Shulan saw that it was getting late, and it was time to leave. At this moment, Mo came out and sent him off with Yihuan. The two of them stood together to send the guest off. It was a very strange scene. Lawyer Bai turned around and smiled. Goodbye then. Mo casually placed his arm on Yihuan's shoulder and smiled. Goodbye, Lawyer Bai. And no matter what, thank you. This word was really mysterious. Bai Shulan didn't dare to accept it. After Lawyer Bai left, Mo closed the door and looked at Yihuan. Yihuan gently broke free from him and walked to the sofa. It had only been a short while, but she was already exhausted. Mo followed and kissed her cheek. What are you thinking about? No. Yihuan lowered her eyes, and her gaze fell on the indictment. She stared at it for a long time before she picked it up, walked into the study, and shredded it in the shredder. Mo was standing at the door. She knew he was there and looking at her, so she lowered her voice. Are you relieved now? Mo remained where he was and smiled faintly. Yihuan, why do I feel that the indictment is still in your heart? Whatever you think, she said quickly. After he finished speaking, he was in a daze. Mo walked in and stood in front of her. He reached out and pinched her chin, forcing her to look up. Yihuan was unwilling at first, but he was so domineering that she was forced to look up. Let's remarry him. He whispered in her ear and stared at her. Yihuan's body froze. You're not willing? His voice was cold. Yihuan looked down. No. Then let's go get our marriage certificate early tomorrow morning. He was calm and unyielding. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.